Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Game Over Ottawa, for real this time, with no technical difficulties. The New York Islanders have been sensed tonight in surprising fashion. Kevin Mandolisi's NHL debut went just about as good as a goalie could hope for. Joining me today, I've got Adam Copeland from the Zoopcast. How are you doing tonight, Adam?
I am doing very well, Maude. After that, that was a heck of a game for our new favorite goalie, Kevin Mandolisi. So I'm excited to dive into it.
Yeah, we'll get into that and more. I'm just going to quickly shout out our sponsor, Sports Interaction. Want to bet? Then get in on the action at Sports Interaction. The boys of summer are back on the diamond, and March Madness is on deck. Bet pre-game, live and play, or on one of our many prop bets. Sports Interaction makes it easy to deposit, play, and cash out. Head to sportsinteraction.com/STPN, or in Ontario, download the app now using the QR code at the bottom of the screen. 19 plus, please play responsibly. Now, I think we're going to be spending a whole big chunk of time here talking about the performance of Mandolisi. I think before we really get into analyzing how the game went, first I kind of want to ask you how you were feeling before the game in terms of the decision to give him the start, because I know that a lot of people were hoping to see Maude Sogaard just go back-to-back tonight after how great he was against Calgary. So what were your thoughts kind of heading into the game?
I don't know. It was really 50-50 in a way because Maude Sogaard definitely played well enough yesterday. I mean, he gave up 3 goals, but he definitely played well enough yesterday to earn a spot today. But then there's the whole conversation, the ever-evolving conversation of like goalies playing on back-to-backs and like you're not supposed to do that. And it's like, well, you know what? Like, why not give this kid a chance, Mandolisi? Like, let's get him in there. And I think they talked about it on the broadcast yesterday night against Calgary, but they were like, the players, they tend to play harder when they got a young kid back there who's in his first game, right? I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but they make the decision to put Mandolisi in, and I wasn't expecting much at all. Like, honestly, like, this is a guy who is a 6th round pick. He's played in the ECHL this year, AHL as well, obviously, but you're thinking maybe there's not much here, like what's going to happen, and this guy just blew it out of the water. It was unreal. Now, obviously, it's one game, and I'm not going to make a definitive this goalie is good or this goalie is bad after one game, but man, that's a heck of a start, right? Like, that is a 46 saves on 48 shots performance going into a shootout. That is just craziness on the road with the team in front of you on a back-to-back. And some of those saves were so clutch, man. Like, in overtime, Travis Hamonic is having a 3-minute shift in overtime, and you're on the penalty kill. And then here's this rookie goalie just sliding all over the place. He's making the craziest saves. I thought he was unreal. And the only thing that matters is that he gave him a chance to win, because he definitely had some adventures, right? Like, he lost his stick 3 times. I can't remember the last time I've seen that.
That's right, yeah.
It was hilarious. And he's like, there was times in the second period, he's like spread eagle in the crease. He's like doing a, belly flop or something like that. He's just all over the place. But man, I'm really happy for him. Like, imagine that, right? You're in the ECHL like a couple months ago, and now you're playing, NHL for the Sens. Like, it's pretty crazy. So all in all, it's an unreal debut, and very, very happy for the kid.
Yeah, super awesome story tonight. And one thing, it was an interesting point that they brought up actually on the broadcast tonight that I didn't really think about in regards to him playing in the ECHL this season. Because one of the things I was kind of worried about is, when a goalie has spent more time in the ECHL this season than the AHL, you kind of think like, oh, that's a huge jump going up basically 2 leagues. But they made the great point that him starting in the ECHL is actually kind of better than being a backup in the AHL, because like, in terms of structure and stuff, there probably isn't as, like, there's obviously a talent gap between the A and the E, but in terms of structure, I don't think it's that much of a difference. And if you're playing a ton of games as a starter in the ECHL, that's better than just playing every now and then in the AHL. So I feel like we saw that here tonight, that Mandolisi didn't look out of place at all. And a few times tonight, it was a little bit sketchy, like you said, about how he was losing his stick. And there was a couple times, spread eagle on his back. That kind of reminded me, kind of gave me a little bit of Andrew Hammond vibes, to be honest. I remember some of those games. I think it was that West Coast road trip at the beginning of the Andrew Hammond run, where I just remember some saves from him where you're just like, how did he save that? It doesn't look orthodox at all, but somehow he just had the magic on his side. And I feel like there was a little bit of that for Mando here tonight. It was just absolutely awesome. And we talk about a team playing more responsible in front of their rookie goalie. I think overall, for at least for the first two periods tonight, I think the Sens did a much better job of that tonight than they did yesterday for Maude Sogard. It got away from them a little bit in the third period as they got outshot 15-6 in the third. But would you agree that for most of the game they did pretty well for Mando, even though it ended up being almost 50 shots on goal?
Yeah, I do agree, because it's funny, right? Like he had to make 46 saves. So automatically you're thinking, man, the Sens just got wiped. But the first two periods, like the game was really a slog for the first two periods. Like it was so unenjoyable from every angle to watch. It was so boring. And that is like, that's not a bad thing in terms of the Sens performance. Like that's kind of what you want. You want a team that's being just, defensively sound, and they're shutting it down, and they're not letting any great opportunities come their way. That goal, I think it was Pellick who scored the first Islanders goal. Like that was the first time where they let a guy like walk right in, right? Like
that was really rough.
It was rough. Like there was no, and I think they were like talking about it in the intermission. It was like a really bad change, and like Tkachuk couldn't get there, but like, like whatever, mistakes happen. And it was a really good shot. Like no chance for Mandolese at all. But yeah, I mean, the Sens kind of kept it outside for the most part of it. And all the shots that were put on, maybe there was some traffic in front or something like that. For the most part, they were savable shots, and Mandolese totally did his job in the first two periods, that is, of saving everything that was coming his way. And then in the third, you could tell that was a team that had just played an overtime game last night and then traveled. Like they were looking a little bit rough. But that's where you need your goalie to step up, and he totally stepped up. Like he totally kept them in the game in that third period. And also, not to mention, like yeah, they were still tired, and the game was getting away from them, but there were some like desperation plays by the Sens in that third period that were clutch. Like Parker Kelly, this was right before an Islanders goal, so it's kind of a moot point, but it's still like Parker Kelly dove in front of an open net, shot by the Islanders. That would have been a goal, and he blocks it. And then they're blocking shots everywhere. They're like diving to clear pucks out. So like the effort, like they were trying, you could tell they were really trying, and it was just like the legs weren't there, and there were some really long shifts in there too. But yeah, man, like Mandolese did it all. No complaints for me. And the Sens did all they could. Mandolese did all they could, and it's really great that they were able to get a win.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that even if the legs weren't there at certain times tonight, the heart was there for the whole game. I was definitely going to mention that big block by Parker Kelly as well. And I also noticed a sequence in the first period, I believe it was, where Tyler Maude blocked 3 shots in about a 20-second span. Like that's at that moment, I was like, yeah, they really want to win this game for the kid. And we just saw that all night. The Sens ended up with 21 block shots, which I don't pay too much attention to that stat. So I don't know if that's a lot for or more than in a typical game, but it really looked like they were putting their bodies on the line there tonight to help out the kid in net. So I was very happy with that element from the team tonight. And there was also Zaitsev, who saved a goal. I think it had trickled behind Mandolese in the crease, and it was just sitting there, and then everyone goes to dive for it, but luckily Zaitsev was right there to clear it. So actually some praise for Zaitsev tonight. I didn't really notice him too much tonight, so I think that's good. Like
that's a positive. Yeah.
Normally 100%. For Zaitsev, that's what you want. Yeah. In terms of the rest of the D-core, though, I want to ask you about what you think about Eric Branstrom's game, like tonight and last night too, because he's seen that elevated ice time with the Jake Sanderson injury. It ended up being 22 minutes and 37 seconds for him tonight. I think he got a shift in overtime as well. I can't remember if he was caught on the ice at the same time as Hamonic for that 3-minute shift. It might have been Shabbat, but yeah, what have you thought about Branstrom with the increased ice time?
Well, the Zoobcast listeners know that I have never been the biggest Branstrom fan in past years. I have not. I wouldn't say that I've been an absolute hater, but I've definitely not been as high on him as other people have. And this year, like he has just exploded. Like he's essentially forced me to completely change my opinion. And these last 2 games, like tonight in the first period, I thought he was all over the place. I thought he was the Sens easily their best defenseman and maybe even their best player in the first period. He was absolutely going. And I think there's Jake Sanderson being out sucks, obviously, like for many reasons, but it kind of opens the door for Brandstrom because he's always been like, it seems like the whole year it's been Shabbat, Sanderson, Brandstrom, right? And then you could even make the argument that Sanderson has gone ahead of Shabbat in a way, but it's always Brandstrom's always been like kind of the last pick there. And now there's this injury and DJ is like, go on, like do it. Like, here's your chance. And I think, first of all, I think that's, we harp on DJ a lot, but this is good by him. Like he's given him some rope here. And man, Brett, he's flying. Like he's absolutely flying. He's getting into it in the offensive zone really, really well. He's much more sound defensively than I've seen from him in the past, which is excellent. So I think he's been really, really strong. And, he's on like this 1 year prove it, like last chance prove it contract essentially this year. And I think he's making a heck of a case to stick around. And I think, if you're the Sens, you have to look at this and be like, we've got a couple defensemen coming up. Like, I know they want to bring in Clevin from North Dakota at the end of the year. But like this guy is totally making a positive impact on the team. And even like he's been playing most of the year as a third pair player. And if he's doing that well as a third pair player, and obviously tonight elevated role, he's playing like second pair minutes, but why wouldn't you not keep him? Right. Like he's a positive really anywhere he plays. So, I mean, to answer your question, I think he's been excellent with the added ice time. Obviously you want Sanderson back as soon as possible, but in the meantime, like this is the recipe. Like you're giving Brandstrom his minutes. No one else deserves those minutes besides Brandstrom. So 100% on board. I think he's been great.
Yeah, I do have to say, after the Sanderson injury, I was slightly concerned that DJ was just gonna like give a bunch of ice time to Nick Holden in that left D spot. So very happy with DJ for giving Brandstrom the reins and just letting him run with it. He's been really great. I loved how he was jumping up in the rush today. He had those 2 shots that hit the post, which was heartbreaking because after he finally broke that goal drought 2 games ago, I think it was. It would have been awesome to see him pick up another one real quick because we would all love to see more offense in his game, really, because I think that's been the main knock on Brandstrom is that if you're going to be a smaller defenseman, a little bit weaker physically, that most people would expect you to be putting up points to kind of offset that, and it just hasn't really been there for him. But I think with this elevated ice time, I think we're probably going to see him pick up some more points over the next few games while Sanderson's still out. And also, interesting that you brought up Clevin. That's something that I haven't really thought much about because he's also a left-handed D, correct?
I believe he is.
I think so.
I'm not sure. I don't know too much about him, but I know he's at North Dakota and he's like this huge big guy, and they're really high on him. For whatever reason. Yeah,
huge defenseman. You know that they're going to want to get him into the lineup as soon as possible. When they probably will sign him at the end of the season. With probably, I can't remember exactly when the college season ends, but the NHL season kind of runs a little bit later lately into April, so there'll probably be a few games for Clevin to potentially get into. That'll be interesting to see when Sanderson is back as well, because we at that point we're not going to be wanting to see Brandstrom scratch or anything to get Clevin in there. I do kind of wonder if they can look at maybe playing Brandstrom on the right hand side at some point. Obviously, you're not going to do it now while Sanderson is out. However, in terms of just seeing him play in this elevated role and doing quite well so far, if he keeps it up, it could be sort of a situation where you want to keep him at that high ice time, right? Or like he's obviously been great in a third pairing role, but I do wonder if maybe we can keep his ice time up a little bit more. Like I know he's played right D in the past. Like, what do you think about that idea?
Well, I think it's definitely fair, right? Like he's proving that he can handle this elevated ice time in the last 2 games, at least. Like obviously it's a small sample size and you keep it going and you see how he does. Playing him on the right, I don't remember the last time he's played the right side. Maybe I'm just forgetting it, but he definitely, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a defenseman. I don't know how hard that switch actually is to play from the left side to the right side. Like that's not something I'd say I'm a huge expert on, but at this point, like, why not give it a try, right? Because you think about where the D is going to be at. You're assuming that, I mean, there's a lot of talk right now that Zaitsev is going to be gone by the deadline. And then, that's a spot freed up on the right side there. Maybe he takes that, but you're right. Like you want to try to play your best players as much as possible. Like that's just the simplest philosophy, the simplest way to put it. And so right now, Brandstrom is proving that he is one of your better players on defense. So it would definitely make sense to put him on the right side if it meant to get him more minutes. So I'd definitely be all over that. And as for the earlier point on Cleven, because they did this with Sanderson last year, right? Like they brought him in at the end of his college season. Now, unfortunately, Sanderson was injured and he didn't get to play. I'm really interested to see what they do with Cleven, because I think one big factor is, are they still in a playoff race when he gets here? And if they are, I would be surprised if he got into games, right? Because at that point, you're like focused, like laser focused, like let's just make, do our best. Let's try to make the playoffs here. This kid can wait. He's still young. But let's say like, knock on wood, like God forbid, let's say they go on like this crazy losing streak here, and they're out. At that point, why not? Like you might as well get him into a couple games and at least see what you have. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. You do whatever you want on D. Like the DJ is not afraid to mix up the pairs. He's done it all year. And I'm all for Brandstrom playing a little bit more. And I guess we'll see on Cleven.
Now, since you did mention the possibility of the team being in a playoff race in April, I had to do what I hate doing and pull up the standings.
I'm a person who I will not. I haven't looked at the standings all year, to be honest. Like I literally like I don't even know how many points they're out. I don't want to focus on that at all. I mean, I hope they make the playoffs, but I think for them it should be like let's just win every game. Like who cares? But anyway, sorry I cut you off there.
I think that would definitely be the mindset in the locker room in terms of just take it one game at a time and you want to win every game. I'm definitely the type of person where we win a couple games and I'm like, okay, let me look just to see like who we're playing next and stuff. So I have to admit I was tempted and I had to go look at the standings right now. It would have been huge if we were able to beat the Islanders in regulation today, just because they're one of the teams we're chasing. But we do have remarkably 4 games in hand on them and Florida. So I definitely feel like it's possible to close the gap on them. The only problem is that both of them are not actually in the wild card. They're the 2 spots below. So, but hey, Washington lost tonight. Pittsburgh is playing a late game. Maybe they'll lose. I feel like I don't expect us to get super close to the playoff race, but also I don't think we're going to be tanking really hard for Bedard either. Like we got Chicago coming up, but that's definitely a winnable game. St. Louis has struggled this year, but then we got really tough matchups in Boston and Carolina coming up after that. So I don't know. I feel like the team is on kind of a heater, despite it doesn't really feel like it because we had that big 2-week break for the All-Star break, but they are 7-3-0 in the last 10 at this point. So it's kind of giving me hope. Like, do you feel that little bit of hope?
It's like certainly really exciting, right? Like you're finally, like for the first time in years, the team is going on like runs. Like this isn't the first run they've had this year either, right? Like they were really good in December and then they kind of tapered off a little bit and now they're getting on this run again. And so at this point, what I'm concerned with is let's keep this. Let's not do, this stupid thing where the Sens go on this great winning streak and then just suck for a while. Like what is the deal with that? This needs to stop. Like consistency is really important for me. And I think in terms of hope for the playoffs, like, I mean, as long as they're mathematically not eliminated, I will always have hope for the Sens making the playoffs. Like, right. Like why wouldn't you as a fan? But I think like, what are they out? Like 6 or 7 points out now, which isn't that much. But the problem is, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit, is they have so many teams. Like the East is so stupid. Like there's so many teams in front of them that it's almost like so many things would have to go right for them to do it. Where it's like you would essentially need, like people on Twitter are talking about it, right? You need a hamburger run of sorts.
Yeah, pretty much. We need the Mando run.
The Mando run, exactly. And people are calling it like you need 2 rookie goalies to make up the one for the hamburger run 2.0, right? So run with Sogard.
They'll join forces, and turn into,
exactly.
If they can turn into, combine to even half of what Hammond did, that would be amazing.
It would be really. I don't know. I think at this point, and Louis, Josh, and I on the Zoobcast, we talk about it all the time. Like our expectations at the beginning of the season were not like, it's going to be hard for the Sens to make the playoffs just with how the East stacks up and everything. So the way that the season is working out right now, if the Sens end up finishing, 4, 5, 6 points out of a spot, I think I'm content with that. as an
Mhm.
overall season. Obviously, you can look back at the little runs and the little mistakes, and you can be like, oh, that's why we didn't make the playoffs. Like if we did this right, that's why we would have been in. And you can nitpick that, and that's fine. But overall, at the beginning of the season, if you were to tell me the Sens are going to finish 4 points out of a spot, I would say I would call that a successful season. So I think that's kind of the way that I'm looking at it. And in the meantime, like 7-3-0, like great run. Like enjoy the run. Have fun watching the games. Like they're not, the most enjoyable games from start to finish, right? Like they played really bad hockey for 57 minutes yesterday and won. And then it was like a slog today. But enjoy the wins, and the goalies are playing well and the vibes are really good, most importantly. So I'd say that's what I'm looking forward to here for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I totally agree with the point of if we finish 4 to 6 points out of the playoffs, that's pretty much a positive overall. Like if you said that's where we would end up at the beginning of the season, I would definitely take that. I think it's maybe it's just because I'm like paying so much closer attention to the team now doing these streams that it's like riding, especially the post-game reactions, just riding the highs and the lows every
Yeah.
game. I feel like maybe it's just amplified for me, but I feel like it's been a huge roller coaster of a season compared to if we were kind of like a few games above 500 kind of for the whole season, and then we fall off at the end, and then we're a few points out, as opposed to being kind of going up and down from ninth and like 12th in the conference and just going back and forth. It's like kind of a will they won't they thing all season.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just glad that the Sens have managed to keep things entertaining enough to keep everyone actually watching the whole season, because for the past 5 years there was a lot of games where it's just like, I'm gonna turn this on because I have nothing better to do. But if I
Yeah.
did, like, would I really be bothering to watch this team at this point? Whereas this season you can tune in and it's not always going to be a great game, but you will probably at least see some great plays like from our top players. So I agree that if that's where we finish, I would be pretty happy with the result overall.
Yeah,
Just
and I
gonna clear
definitely
my
agree.
throat
Like,
here.
no, that's all right. I think you make a good point. Like watching the players, like look at Stutzla. Oh my God,
Yes, definitely got to talk about Stutzla.
this guy's unreal, man. Like he's really like people are tweeting. Josh tweeted from the Zoomcast the other day, like the quote tweet of when Frank Saravelli released the details of Stutzla's contract,
Oh
and
yeah.
everybody was like crapping on it. I'm like, look at this, man. His contract hasn't even started yet, and it's a steal. Like we have this guy. Like and I think someone from TSN 1200 posted Stützle is the most naturally talented Sens player since when? And I think it might, like, I mean, I'm young. Like I wasn't there for like the early days and early Spezza and like, Heatley and Alfie and all that at their primes. But like this guy is unreal what he's doing. And he's come, and I think it's really important that he has come a long way since he started. Like you could see it when he was playing in his rookie year. Like the flashes were there, but he couldn't really get it right. Like, something was always going to go wrong or it was inconsistent. He would get really frustrated. But now it's like he's sticking with it all the time. And it's like, it's really working for him now. And he's working on stuff. And he is like just flat out beating guys in so many different ways. And it is so awesome. Like, when's the last time the Sens have had a player that is like so much better than everybody else, like Stützle is? And he, the rest of the top six is really good too, obviously. But to me, he has been the one that has stood out the most as making like the biggest step and really cementing himself as like a future, even current star. Like it's still, honestly, it's insane he didn't go to the All-Star game. With all due respect to Brady, like, because he's been great too. Like Brady deserves to go, but like Tim, I mean, come on. Like for the next like years to come, I think he's going to be their all-star. And he is just such a treat to watch what he does with the puck. Like he is just going all over the place. Scored another goal today. Like he's got 6 points in 48 hours.
Goal.
Yeah, like it's unreal. It's so fun to watch. So I think you make a great point. Like watch the Sens because these guys are great. And it's, Sanderson's not in the lineup, but I love watching him. He has been unreal this year as well, in my opinion. But like just tuning in and seeing like Stützle do something crazy, or like Giroux's making like the super smart, intelligent play and like using his line mates, like DeBrincat's like sniping it. It's like you have reasons to watch. Finally, you have reasons to watch. And I think that's really important and definitely a good positive that you've alluded to.
I saw that tweet as well about the question about, is Stützle the most like naturally talented Sens player like ever really. Or
Yeah.
when I think about it, like obviously there's Carlson, but I think he would be the most talented since Spezza. Would you agree with that?
I think so. Yeah. Like,
And
I mean, the only
also,
other guy that I was thinking of is like Carlson, really,
yeah.
because you have that. I mean, but it's like, forward defenseman, like it's kind of hard to compare. But even still, like Carlson, I'm not taking anything away from Carlson. He was unreal when he was here. He's the best player the Sens have had. But in terms of skill, like just pure natural gift at the game, I think Stützle might be better. Like this guy is doing things that I haven't really seen anybody else on the Sens do, and it's really cool to watch.
And speaking of Spezza, like the thing that I'm thinking about that is in terms of puck skills, like in the last 20 years for the Sens, he is like easily the guy, the most talented with that. But then compared to Stützle, like Stützle is clearly a better skater than Spezza was.
Yeah.
Like ever at any point, I think. Like I'm sure maybe it's just the recency bias in my brain of thinking of Spezza like in his 30s after him being a bit of a slower player. I'm sure he was very fast when he was a younger player, but like Stützle has got to be up there as one of the best like purely talented skaters in the league too. On top of the puck skills and the shooting, it's just he's the complete package. And we talk all the time about on this show about how he's getting that penalty kill ice time now too, and just playing over 20 minutes a game as a center. Like he's just developing into a complete player. Just absolutely amazing stuff from him, and that contract is totally a steal. Like
Such a steal, unreal.
If he was
like,
an RFA heading into this offseason, what a mess that would be.
Yeah, like that's what I was going to hint at is like we don't have to worry about this guy for 8 years. Like how awesome is that? And like an era of the Sens where every trade deadline and like every offseason it's like, oh, we got to sign this guy, we got to sign this guy. And now finally your core all is essentially almost locked up fully for a while here. You're giving yourself a window. And Stützle's got 8 years, and he's like, I don't even think he's reached his peak yet, which is the craziest part of it, right? Like he is what 21 or whatever. Like he's so young. Like he's gonna get so much better even in the next like 1, 2, or 3 years. And you're gonna be like, man, we're paying this guy what, like whatever he is, like 8 million, 8.5 million. That's a steal, especially with the cap going up too. That's a whole different conversation. But yeah, it's gonna be really fun to watch, man. Like I think that's kind of an important thing for some fans to remember is like, is this season going exactly how the Sens or how you might have planned it? Like, maybe not. But these guys are so young, and there is still so much success to be had. Like, I'm sure of that. So it's definitely worth it to stick with it. And I'll watch Stützle any day. He's unreal.
Yeah. And I also got to say, too, for all the criticism that Pierre Dorion gets, we have to give him full credit for managing to lock up this core, like long term at solid cap hits for pretty much everyone, too. Like, you'll get a little bit of debate about Chabot's cap hit at this point, but I don't think anyone would argue it when it was signed. It's more in terms of like a little bit of inconsistent performance. However, Tkachuk's deal, perfect. Stützle's deal, absolutely amazing. Batherson's deal looks like a steal, even though he can be a little bit inconsistent too. He's paid at the level where we can deal with that, And I got to give huge props to Dorion for that.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's fair to say that he's had his hits and misses. And I think, and I'm totally guilty of this. Like we tend to focus on the misses just because it's easier. Like it's like, oh, Dorion, like he did another, dud of a trade or another dud of a signing. And he's had those, 100% he's had those. But it's true, right? Like you bring up a really good point. He signed this contract that everybody is talking about that's so good. And the Batherson contract that was good, and the Chabot contract, and all these contracts that are good. And so but that makes it really hard to kind of evaluate him as a GM, because it's so like it's still like erratic almost. Like he does something that's so good and then he'll do something that everybody is questioning, like I don't even understand why you would do this. But fair point, right? Like you give him props for the successful things that he's done. And I don't know, like, with new ownership looming, I don't know what his future is with the Sens. I think a lot of people have kind of already had it written in that new ownership is going to come in and kind of clean house, and that very well could happen. But I don't know. I have the sense that, Dorion is doing his job with the mindset that he's going to still be here to see it through. And I don't know if that's 100% going to be true, but I think that is definitely very beneficial for the team in the sense that he's got the future interest in mind instead of just being like, we're going to do this so that I can try to win right now and save my job, essentially. But yeah, it's there's a debate to be had for sure about Pierre Dorion's job as Sens GM, but hits and misses, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of an interesting thing with Dorian where I feel like he's done an amazing job assembling the core of this team and he's got all the primary pieces just perfect. And then it's all of the depth moves and all of the depth players where it's like, why did you pay this much for this player? Why did you give
Yeah.
up a third round pick for Hamonic and stuff like that? So I agree that I think Dorian is still doing his job as if like he expects to be here with the new ownership too, which I think is the right mindset. I think that's all you can really do is you wouldn't want to see the guy just kind of like phoning it in, for the rest
Yeah.
of the season, expecting to get fired for sure. But I go back and forth on Dorian all the time, but to be honest, I wouldn't mind if new ownership kept him for one more season. I would say just in terms of can we see this team finally actually get to the playoffs? If he can give him one more year to potentially surround this core with the right pieces for once, because that's the main thing he's struggled with. He's gotten the main things right, and then it's all these other things on the side that haven't really planned out as much. I think I would give him one more year. Like I wouldn't be mad if he was fired because it's definitely been an up and down tenure for him. But would you agree that you would do that, or do you disagree?
I'm not sure. I think it's a fair point to say one more, like, let's give him one more go. But I feel like we've been saying that for a little bit now, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
like, let's give him one more go. Like this is the season. And then, this year it was let's give him one more go. Like this is the season. And now, remains to be seen if that's going to be a success or not. Um, I don't know. I do think that fresh blood in the front office would probably help just to see things from a different perspective, because anybody who comes into the front office is going to be able to see like, okay, we've got this great top six. Like anybody can see that. Any manager's
Mm-hmm.
going to see that. And it's like, oh, we got Sanderson, who's great, and we got Shabbat and Zub and Brandstrom, and they're great. But then it's those new managers that are going to be like able to identify the problems that you pointed out, right? Like, oh, this guy kind of stinks. Like this guy's kind of an anchor, and oh, the fourth line's not great. Like we could probably do a bit better on that. So in that sense, I think new personnel, I would welcome it.
Mm-hmm.
If Pierre Dorion ended up sticking around, I would say I would be surprised.
Yeah.
I don't think I would be like irate. I don't think I'd be furious. Um, but if it's another, like, next year is really important for
Mm-hmm.
them to get over the hump, I think. So if next year turns out to be a dud with Dorian, then you have like there's at that point enough is enough and there's no excuse, I think. Um, I don't know. I think I don't know. We'll see what they do. I think it's likely that when new ownership comes in, they will kind of overhaul. Just seeing the track record of Dorian and some of these guys, they'd probably be like, it's probably in our best interest to just bring in someone new and try to get a fresh, face in here. But we'll see, right? Like that's kind of up to them. We don't know who's going to own the team. Ryan Reynolds, hopefully, but
Yeah,
we'll
hopefully.
we'll see how that shakes down.
Yeah, I definitely agree that I think it's more likely than not that they'll move on from Dorian under new ownership. But you definitely brought up a great point about the bringing in new eyes and just them being able to see things differently than Dorian in terms of the things that he may not have done so well over his tenure. Like certain things where he might not necessarily, like, we as fans criticize and think like, oh, this is what needs to improve, but he might still just think like this is how, if we continue
Yeah.
down this path, it will eventually work, right? So I think that's definitely a fair point there. And uh another thing I want to ask you about is we mentioned the contracts of the core players on this team, and talking about how Tim Stützle, we're lucky that we don't have to deal with the RFA negotiations with him this offseason. But there is the Alex DeBrincat negotiations, and I kind of want to pick your brain on how you're feeling in terms of that. Now, it seems from the insider reports that it doesn't sound like there's going to be any serious negotiations until the new ownership does come in. It seems like they don't, at the current moment, they don't necessarily have the green light to just hand him the giant contract. But in terms of when they can actually start discussing a contract with him, what kind of a contract would you like to see?
I don't know. I really don't know. Like I don't feel torn. Like I want to keep him 100%. Like he's unreal. Anybody who says that they should trade him, I would disagree with. I think they should do everything in their power to keep him. I like, man, it's so tough. You definitely have to wait for the new ownership, obviously, like you said. I think what if I were Alex DeBrincat, I would sign my qualifying offer and I would do
Mm-hmm.
one more year of RFA because why wouldn't you? Like you're giving yourself so much freedom to be like, okay, we're gonna have one more tryout year here, and I'm not locking in. But if it goes really well, I can lock in, and if it goes kind of bad, I can kind of skedaddle. Um, so if that ends up happening, I think that would make a lot of people quite nervous, for rightfully so. But I don't think it would be the end of the world because I think if all next year shapes up like we're all hoping it to be and they take the next step and he's on that 1 year QO and he's going to be like, oh man, I can see a future here. And I think you know a lot of people have pointed it out. Like we had Matt Bosty on the Zoobcast the other day, and he was saying like these guys just love to be around each other, and I think that is a really important thing that should not get overlooked. Like we have seen what has happened with locker rooms in this league when
Mm-hmm.
players don't want to be there. Like look at Vancouver, it's a mess,
Yep.
and the Sens even like
We've
years
seen it
ago.
here.
Yeah,
Yep.
we've seen it here exactly. So the fact that it's so like the vibes are good, and I think that's going to rub off on him. And I think he's going to be like, it seems like it's pretty nice to be here. Um, I don't know. I have like the little hope and confidence in me that he's going to resign, either, medium or long term. But I do think he's going to do a 1 year QO.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's any kind of a red flag. But it's a sign that the Sens need to go next year. Like there's no excuses next year and they need to go. They need to make the playoffs at least. They need to bulk up in the bottom six. They need to bulk up on D for Alex DeBrincat to stick around. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I really have no idea. Like honestly, I have no idea what the contract would look like. No clue.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how to put a number on it or a figure. I haven't even thought that far ahead. But for now, I think that's where I'm at. Is you've got this guy for one more year on a prove it, and we'll see what he can do.
Yeah, I agree that I wouldn't be too worried with him taking the qualifying offer just because we're in the scenario where it doesn't make any sense to be trading him right now, and I don't think because of the whole thing of being able to sign the qualifying offer and then walk as UFA, I don't think you would get considerably more assets for DeBrincat at this year's trade deadline than you would when he's a UFA anyway as a rental.
Yeah.
Like it would be a little bit more just because you're getting him for 2 playoff runs as opposed to 1, but just because of that whole situation, I don't think it would be such a huge thing where it's like, oh, we would miss out by keeping him that much longer. I think a lot of fans are kind of scarred by when Mark Stone signed a 1 year
Yeah.
deal that led him directly to UFA. However, if I remember correctly, I don't think that was even actually signing the qualifying offer. I think that was just like
It was just a
Dorian
one
gave
year
him that.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and that seemed to be the situation, more of a situation where it seemed like Stone wanted out. But the big difference there was that the Sens had no hope of actually improving next season at that time.
Yeah.
Whereas we pretty much expect a playoff team next year at this point. It would be a colossal failure if they weren't. And if this team is able to get into the playoffs next year, you got to think that DeBrincat's point totals are going to be going up, and you got to think that he would be pretty happy here at this point. So I agree that I wouldn't be too worried about him signing the qualifying offer, especially because his goal scoring is down a little bit this year. And if you locked him in for like 9 million or more right now, and then it was about the same next year too, that could be a potential situation where it's like, he's not an awful fit on the team, but maybe he isn't a $9 million player in this situation. So I think I would totally be fine with having just like that 1 more year for him and then being able to negotiate from there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And you talk about his goal scoring going down, and man, like it doesn't even really look like it though. Like he is getting so like the chances have been there all
Yeah, for
year. It
sure.
was so frustrating at the beginning of the year when he was like hitting posts and he was getting breakaways and it would bobble off his stick. It's like he's been there. Like he's still the same player. And I think a lot of people can see that now that he's starting to score a little bit more. Um, I'm not worried about Alex DeBrincat scoring. Like, he will be fine. He's had a bit of an unlucky year, and I think next year he's going to regress and he's going to be unreal. Like, he's going to go back to what he was, and the team's going to be bumping. Or, I mean, that's me being an optimistic fan, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, the thing is, like, if you trade him, or if you don't, if he does his QO and then he doesn't resign, you're just going to have to solve another problem. Like, you're just going to have to go find another guy like that. Like, you're causing yourself more issues by trading him, essentially. So I think that would be a poor decision. And yeah, like, I'm not worried about him at all. He's gonna be fine. Like, there's enough good players on the team where he'll be fine, and he's still DeBrincat. Like, he's like, do you see his goal yesterday? Oh my god! Like, who is scoring that? Nobody, like, barely anybody else is scoring that goal. So I'm not worried about him at all. I think DeBrincat will do just fine.
Yep, I totally agree with pretty much all of that. And then the last thing I want to ask you about tonight is I discussed this a little bit on my show last night, but kind of just talking to myself about it and a little bit talking with chat too, is that obviously there's the whole Jacob Chikrin fiasco with him getting scratched for 2 games now, being held out for potential trade. And it doesn't sound like Ottawa is going to be involved anymore, even though they had been connected to him for like over a year now. I wanted to get someone else's opinion on this. How do you feel about the Sens kind of not being in on Chikrin, most likely?
I've been very conflicted about this all year because the Sens were, at the beginning of the year, were rumored very heavily towards him for obvious reasons. But then you're looking at it's like, oh, he's injured. And it's like, is he even that good? Like, there was kind of a little bit of like, I'm not too sure in the fan base, or at least for me. And then ever since he's come back and played, he has been unreal for the Coyotes, like, on a really bad team, like, even so, right? So he's definitely proving his worth. Do I think, like, he would 100% help the Sens, and he would 100% be a positive impact? I don't think anybody is doubting that. But I think what is throwing people, including myself, off is that asking price seems really steep. And I understand that he's in a really good contract right now, and that would be beneficial. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think if the Sens traded for Chikrin, I'd be very excited because Jacob Chikrin is on my team. But I'd be very scared to see what that return would look like. And I don't know, like, I don't even know if he's gonna get traded by the deadline. This kind of seems like a summer project almost for the Coyotes, right? Like, when you got everybody in on equal ground and it's after the season, maybe. But at that point, it's like he almost lessens his value because you're losing a playoff run with him. So it's really interesting. I don't know. I think the bidding war is just going to be too crazy. Like, I think the price is just going to drive up way too high for my liking. And I think it's one where the Sens in the offseason need to go, we need a D, or we need to fix our D. Maybe Chikrin's gone by that point. But at that point is when you evaluate, maybe with new ownership, maybe with a new general manager, where you're like, okay, we got to find a guy here. And I'm not sure if now is the time when they're going to do it. So in short, I'm conflicted because he's unreal and he would be great on the Sens. But with what they might have to give up and the teams they'd be fighting with, I'm a little torn on it. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, my whole thing with Chikrin is that this type of player does not become available for trade very often, especially with term left on his contract. So in terms of trying to solve the Sens defense issues, it's just like, it seems like a no-brainer, right, to go after that guy. And then, like, with him off the market, it's like, I have no clue who the hell else who's anywhere near as good as him is gonna potentially be available for the Sens to try to plug into their top 4. Like, someone who you would bring in and you would have high expectations for right away, right? Like, I'm sure they'll end up finding someone who's kind of under the radar, and then that'll be the guy, and we're all kind of questioning it, and then we'll see whether or not it works out. But it's like, missing out on Chikrin, it's like, I don't really know who else I want them to go for. Like, I feel like the name that a lot of people bring up all the time is Matt Roy from LA. If they decide to move a guy out because they have a lot of young defensemen coming up, like, they'll need to make some room for Brandt Clark, and they might even be the team trading for Chikrin apparently. So then that shuffles bodies around on their blue line. But like, is there any defenseman that you're looking at other than Chikrin that maybe the Sens could be looking for in the offseason?
Bringing up LA is definitely fair. Like, I know Dorian has been, like, scouting them, right? Like, they've been a lot of people being like Dorion's at the Kings game again, and he's scouting LA all over the place. I don't know. Like I kind of think the Sens really missed it with Marino. I was hoping they were going to
Yeah.
get him, and he went for pretty cheap to the Devils. And that's working out pretty well for them right now. So I was always a little bit salty about that. I don't know. Like I haven't really checked the free agent class for this summer. And we have the thing is, like, you have no idea who's going to just become available by the summer, by the off season, like who teams are just going to make available. Like maybe some team plummets the rest of the year here and are like, okay, we're going to have to sell off this guy or whatever it is. So I think the way that I see it is you're 100% right. Like a guy like Chychrun does not go on market very often. So at that point, he's a hot commodity and everybody's going to be wanting this guy. But maybe you just wait and see where, what happens in the summer, and see who becomes available. Maybe someone emerges that you really like, you go out and you get them. And then, we don't even have to have this conversation again next year and be like, oh, a good thing we didn't trade all that for Chychrun and we just got this guy instead. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it works out. But I'm really interested to see what the trade package is for Chychrun, because maybe it'll make me just eat my words and be like, oh, well, that was cheap. Like, why didn't the Sens do that? So, we'll see how that goes down. But it should be fun to follow for the rest of however long the saga goes for him.
Yeah, that's what's bothered me the most about this whole Chychrun thing, dragging on for multiple days, and at this point, who knows if he even gets traded, is that I just want to see wherever he goes, I want to know what the final trade package is so that I can judge the Sens for either saying that they should have beat that offer or saying I'm glad that they didn't offer that much. So I just want some closure regardless of how it ends up. But yeah, I agree that I think it's going to be more of a situation of just wait and see in terms of the Sens defense issues. I hope they don't really bring anyone in at the deadline unless it's like a surprising player that you wouldn't really expect to be moved. But I think it's a little bit too early. I think we were talking about the whole GM thing earlier, whether or not Dorion will still be around. I think maybe it's something where obviously he should still be planning as if he's keeping his job, but maybe leave it to the offseason just in case. Maybe we'll let the new GM handle that if that ends up being the situation. But lots of interesting storylines for the Sens looking ahead to the future. I think that's where we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Thank you so much again for joining me tonight, Adam.
Oh, pleasure. It was a blast, especially after a win like that. The vibes were good. I was feeling good. I was really scared that this was going to be after a loss, and I was going to be like, oh man, I am not going to want to do this. Like, I'm going to be in such a bad mood, but clutch game to have me on.
Yeah, I'm very glad that I had a guest for this game too, considering I've done all the games against the Islanders now this year, and they're not the most exciting team. So
I'm so sorry.
luckily the last game, it was really Greg's debut, so at least I had that to talk about the whole time. And then we got Mandelizi's debut. So just awesome stuff tonight, awesome game. Great show. I think you're a great guest. Do you want to plug your socials and the Zoobcast as well?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Adam Copeland. Zoobcast. I don't care if you follow my personal. Follow the Zoobcast, man. We're having fun on there. It's me, Louie, and Josh, just having a great time, and we put out episodes more or less once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. So definitely follow at Zoobcast on Twitter, and I think that's about it for me. So thanks again, Maude, for having me on. This was a blast.
Awesome. Yeah, so Game Over Ottawa will be back on Friday as the Sens will take on the Blackhawks that night, and Charlie will have that game for you guys. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to SDPN, and have a good night.
Game over! Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.